Okay, give me a wave, someone on Zoom, so I know you can hear me. Okay, amazing, thank you. Lovely. Okay, good morning, everyone. Hello. Thank you so much, everyone who has made the effort to come in, who has made the effort to come on. It's really, really lovely to actually be teaching you this week in person. We are going to start today our first of the topics, but I want to dedicate a couple of minutes summarizing what I said last week without any of the details, but just so that you if you have, let's say, if you weren't on or you intend to listen to the recording, but you haven't yet listened to it, just so that you have an idea what we set up last week and why we're diving straight in this week. So last week was the introduction to the whole series of contemporary halakhic topics. And I mentioned then that the focus will never be on the bottom line. So, you know, you hear the words halakha and you think, okay, so we're going to learn the details, we're going to learn the rules, we're going to learn the laws. But the focus is never going to be on the bottom line, but rather, primarily, we're going to focus on the process of how we get there. And I explained last week, you know, a few reasons why this will be our focus, primarily because if we build up an appreciation of the halakhic process as it is, as it's been developed through the ages, and we did a brief sort of historic timeline of the halakhic process and its development. If we gain a deeper appreciation of the halakhic process, we will always have a greater appreciation of the bottom line when we receive it. I also find it more interesting to grapple with the halakhic process than just to hear the bottom line answer. And deeper than that, we discussed how, in practice, we will always need to come to a conclusion. So there may be very many different and varying opinions out there on a given topic, but for the sake of pragmatism, we will eventually have to come down to a conclusion and we'll have to rule X or Y. However, the discussion and the argument and the debate that's gone on beforehand doesn't lose any of its value. So in doing so, meaning in concluding that X is the normative law that we're going to follow, it doesn't mean that we've forgotten about Y and the reasons that they argued, no, the answer should be Y. And we may have a case where, for specific circumstances, we are looking for reasons to be lenient in this particular situation, and we'll put a few things together. And one of the things will be, this authority's logic for arguing that actually I think we should rule Y, even though that's not the normative halakha. So those were a few of the reasons that I said our focus is on the process. The topic that I've chosen to speak about today is highly, highly contemporary. I did the same thing last year. For those of you in the class, I started last year with artificial meat, which was totally, you know, cutting edge. It's still really, really week by week, month by month developing from a scientific and technological perspective, and therefore from a halakhic perspective, because we are dealing with different realities every, whatever, month, let's say. And I've chosen to do the same thing this year, to start with a topic which is highly contemporary. Although I must add that none of the other topics that we spent time on last year, which were perhaps less contemporary, were any less fun to grapple with. But one point, and I still haven't told you what the topic is, sorry, although you've got it on your source sheet. One point that I will say, which is why this is such a good topic to start with, is because in answering the question that we're about to introduce, in answering the question today, we are actually going to be referring back to a few of the points that we've mentioned in our introductory share about how the halakhic process works in general. And so I quite like it because in a way, it will segue into this specific topic. As you will see, I'll keep on referring back to certain points that I discussed last week. So as you can see, we will be discussing artificial intelligence, a massive topic that is having a lot of influence in very many different spheres today. We will in particular today be asking the question, can AI, can artificial intelligence paskin for us? Can artificial intelligence stand in place of a halachic authority? Can we use AI to give us a ruling? Can we ask it a halachic question? So before I even ask actually any of you for your knee-jerk reactions, let's try and define what we're talking about. And it's worth spending the time on this. It's always important before we start a topic to know what we're talking about, to know what we're not talking about, to define, you know, what is our question in technology, but it could be in science or whatever other realm. So if we perhaps define AI as a software or program that can absorb a huge amount of information and analyze it and notice patterns and then predict, it will always predict the next word or the next sentence, and it will thereby be able to create a paragraph or an answer, etc. Now, there are two different types of AI. They split them into analytics and generative. Analytics is this ability to absorb the data and notice patterns in the data and then make predictions based on that. So just to throw out one example of an analytical use of artificial intelligence, hospitals may use it for diagnosing diseases. So by comparison, based on loads and loads of data and different symptoms that have been provided, the artificial intelligence could provide a diagnosis. However, there's also a totally different side to AI, which is generative, where, again, the software has learned a lot of data, but then based on this, it can generate new data, whether it's written prose or a poem or a song or a video, etc., etc. And this is basically like the production and the generation of totally new work, something that hasn't existed before based on data or information or whatever that has existed before. We'll detail step by step some of the main concerns in general. Again, still nothing to do with halakha yet per se. We'll detail some of the main concerns one by one, but you can see straight away that the generative side of AI is going to present more concerns immediately in the ethical realm, etc., etc. But we've got something that is totally new being developed here based on data that it's been fed. Okay. Different uses and benefits. I mean, there are an infinite amount. Okay, it can be a really good research engine. You can plug in any question, you know, ChatGPT, plug in any question, you'll get an answer. You want an answer in a different style, you can also do that. You want an answer from a particular source or genre of sources, you can also tailor it to that. So first of all, it can just be an excellent search engine. It can provide answers to questions. It could provide paragraphs and prose. It can make up a poem for you, etc. As I mentioned already, hospitals are using it for a whole variety of tasks based on patterns and many other points of data. It can predict if someone's going to need a C-section. It can identify early signs of stroke. All different uses they are using it for. And actually, one can argue, if we think about it coldly, AI, for example, could read scans far better than any other doctor, than a human trained doctor, because the doctor, however vast their experience is cannot possibly touch on the level of experience that the AI can access based on all the data that's been fed into it. So one could argue AI for sure could surpass the efficiency, etc., and accuracy of a human doctor. for example, with something like scans. There, of course, is always another side to every advantage. There's a disadvantage, pros and cons, etc. But the hospitals have already started using it for a lot of tasks, and they are trying to see the benefits that can be derived from AI. However, alongside all these uses and benefits that either have started or are, being considered, and in all professions this is happening, there are many concerns. There are equally many concerns. For example, AI, we said, is based on data that's been fed into it. And therefore, it will be regenerating biases that have been fed into it. Okay, AI is not impartial. So we think because it's not human, it is. AI is always going to reflect the popular opinion or the majority opinion or just the majority of the information that it's been fed. For example, if you search, I mean, this would happen if you search even on Google, whatever. If you search schoolgirl, if you put in schoolgirl, it will come up associated with stories about sexual abuse. If you search schoolboy, it will not come up with the parallel phenomenon. If you have AI dealing with insurance or something like that, we are worried, the concern goes that we're worried that it will continue to propagate assumptions made based on race, gender, age, etc. Because the biases that have been fed in will eventually also be reflected in the output. And so there are concerns that artificial intelligence is actually only reaffirming biases and racism, etc. And the information that's been fed in is always eventually going to be reflected in the output as well. Hallucination. Okay, I learned that this word has a specific meaning in the realm of artificial intelligence. If artificial intelligence does not know the answer, and it's not supposed to know the answer to what you are asking it, I don't know exactly what that means, but let's say it's been programmed for a particular use, and someone feeds in a question that is not relevant, it can answer, I am not capable of answering this question, or something like that. If artificial intelligence, though, is asked a question which in some way it feels like it's supposed to be able to answer, but it cannot, it will make up the answer or part of the answer. So, for example, if someone does ask a halachic question, you may get a really convincing halachic answer. And it will quote different Talmudic passages, etc., because it knows that's the style of a full halachic answer. However, if you then go and check these Talmudic passages, they may not exist at all, or the citation may be totally, it may exist but not be the correct citation whatsoever. And there was a case that a lawyer had used artificial intelligence to research and to structure his entire answer, his entire case to be made in court. And he went to court. This is not a Masa Shahaya. Apparently this has really happened. I should have found some news cutting. I should have found some news cutting to have a bit of evidence here. And he goes to court and presents his case. And the judge found that his citations were not correct citations. He had used artificial intelligence. He had totally blindly trusted the answer. He had not even checked the citations. And
when I read about it, I read, although he didn't check them himself, he had actually asked the artificial intelligence tool, are these real case law? And the answer came back, yes, even though they have been made.
Okay, so he trusted them blindly, but he did bother to type in to AI, are these citations correct? And AI answered yes. And then I don't know the end result, but they were discussing and considering what sanctions, if at all, what sanctions to place on him. And it shows us, well, it shows us a lot of things, but it shows us specifically about AI that there is this ability of hallucination. As I said, that is the technical term apparently. And if it does not know the answer, it does have the ability, and it does make up answers as well. So that, of course, is a major concern. I mean, it brings with it a whole host of frightening possibilities. I mean, I'll add at this juncture, humans can also be picked up, but humans can also be interacted with and asked questions and held accountable. And there are major concerns, I'll segue into the next one, about holding AI accountable for its answers. For example, we've thrown out quite a few uses that hospitals have made of, I think, yeah, if someone is off mute, please remember to mute. Thank you. If someone is on Zoom and you've forgotten to mute, please remember to mute. Thank you. The hospitals may rely on AI giving a diagnosis or something. And what if it's wrong? And who then is liable for the... Yeah. It's not an easy question at the moment at all to answer. And as I mentioned already at the beginning, generative AI, this production of new artwork, of new music, of new videos, etc., that is raising a lot of ethical concerns as to intellectual property rights, and of course, just fake videos in general. So those are some uses and those are some concerns that are raised. And now we can dive in to our questions. Let me see if I can mute everyone. If I go into this. No. Okay. Okay, so jumping back to our question, can AI Paskin halakha, could we place before artificial intelligence a halakhic question and receive an answer and follow that answer? What is the audience's knee-jerk reaction?
Mine, yes.
Okay.
I think given I talk about something like they learn. It's still willfully. We know the basics. I don't see why not.
Okay. So you answer yes, it can, because many Rabbanim learn so much, but there's still room for human error. And you're implying AI actually has the potential to be way more accurate, less human error.
Yeah.
Is that what you're...
Say no.
Okay.
Not quite sure. So I don't know. At the moment, I'm inclined to go there.
Okay. Although your second reason, I mean, I'm not sure that stands. As we've just said, you might have a human rabbi who doesn't want to say to you, I don't know. But we've just found out that this is a phenomenon that is happening. The AI also may not say, I don't know, I'm not capable of providing this answer, and make it up.
Or say, I don't know.
Okay, so you've definitely got a point there. The AI does have the ability to absorb so much more information, of course, to retain it automatically. That's really a fair point. That's really a fair point. Anything else?
Yes, even when we ask Charlotte normally, a lot of it is personalized to ourselves. The rabbi, you always get a better answer from a rabbi that you've asked a question who knows you, who knows your exact circumstances, and they might ask for subtleties that, so sometimes your question is answered differently because of who you are, as opposed to just a standard answer that's a learnt, which is an AI issue. I think it would probably depend on the exact question. A straight halakhic question is a lot easier than a personal question.
Okay. So fabulous point. There is
Something else. From an-
just to summarize that point, there is a huge element of subjectivity like coming to a halakhic ruling, and a good rabbinic authority will ask follow-up questions as and when needed, and also the awareness of the person's specific situation, etc., really does play a part in reaching the halakhic conclusion. I would suggest that can also be argued, but I would suggest that AI is not capable of doing that, or at least not at the moment. Yeah, there was another comment on Zoom.
Yes, I'd like to say that from professional, creative, my profession is creativity. I'm an artist. But to even understand what I'm saying, you don't. I mean, maybe you do, but the class does not. Creativity is something else. And from my point of view, AI is a sin. It's a substitute for, it's like using an escalator all day instead of walking. It's, okay.
Yeah.
I won't say more yet.
So in particular, the generative side of AI, it is exactly your word. It's as if it's trying to substitute for human endeavor, human engagement. And I would jump right here and say straight away, there is also the value of the human endeavor and the human engagement in the halakhic process, which we're going to discuss in more detail. Yeah, you had something to say? Yeah, yeah.
Question answer, like you look at the book.
Yeah.
Then why not? When we get into a personal, like where the rabbi knows you would have details like a situation and things like that, although
That's it. That's it. So if we would say very sort of black and whitely, there are two types of question. There's the question that's very, very straightforward, that you ask someone, but theoretically you could have also looked it up yourself, or you could have also very simply Googled it yourself, or looked it up in a safer yourself. You can understand how AI could perhaps just as easily answer that as your local rabbi. But the second you get into a question where he is asking you follow-up questions and taking into account your personal circumstances, there it becomes a much grayer area, although you also suggested maybe AI has the ability or could develop the ability to also ask pertinent follow-up questions, which of course it really, really could, and it's always being constantly improved upon. Again, you feed in enough follow-up questions and when to ask which question based on all the experience of all the halakhic answers that have been fed into the software. Of course, that skill could also be developed to ask a follow-up question. However, the AI does not know the questioner like the rabbi or halakhic authority standing before the questioner does. Yeah.
we have an interesting situation right now. Yeah. Or what do? You don't know if they're sick, you know they're cancer. But how do you treat it?
No, absolutely. The current situation has raised many, many complex questions. And what I think you're pointing to is the fact that complex questions need complex answers and a lot of sensitivity to be taken in answering them. And AI, as a technological being, so I know how to describe it, does not have sensitivity like a human being does. You wanted to say something?
Some of that.
It's
A lot of what was said,
yeah,
but
yeah.
also the idea that I think you talk to a person, they can not only understand you, but they can see kind of broader implications, like where to go, what's the next step, where to be taken into account. So on the one hand, you dive deeper into a person and in situations, they can also be broad.
Yeah.
Too, to understand bigger, social, environmental, whatever implications, and I don't know that
Yeah. That also, it's a similar point, but it's different. That also is a very, very fair point.
Yudit, me?
I'm repeating it. The AI can, a halachic authority standing for the questioner can first of all delve deeply into that person and in their specific circumstances, but they also have the ability to see broader ramifications, the implications that are more far-reaching, both in time and space. And this is something that is difficult to imagine that AI can do. And this is something that really, really is like a key factor of the halachic process, that decisions are made both relevant for the specific questioner, but also with an understanding of the context. And actually, I'll throw out an example to sort of show why this is so difficult to believe that AI could do this, okay? For example, part of the halachic process is that we may take a passage from the Talmud and interpret it completely out of context and use it in our logic, in our explanation to reach a halachic conclusion. Okay, this happens very, very often. The Talmudic phrase is taken totally actually out of its context as it was found in that location, and then it will be used in an argument in a totally different context. Now, AI does not do that. So for example, if AI has the ability of distinguishing, based on pictures, let's say, between two very, very closely related species of wolves or something, I don't know, and one species lives in a particular, like in Antarctica, for example, but the other species lives in a totally different place, climate, whatever. What really is happening when we analyze the very accurate results of artificial intelligence is that the ability to distinguish between the similar animals is often being based on the background. And when they took the different species out of the background that they were found in, the results, the accuracy of the results dropped enormously, which shows you straight away the main tool that artificial intelligence was using in this exercise to distinguish between very similar species was actually the background. Now, that is, for example, a mashal for the nimshal of what we do in the halachic process, and it would explain why the problem that you raised is a problem. Artificial intelligence is not able to take something out of its context and apply it in a different context. It's very much based and dependent on the information in the data that it's been fed, which is huge, which is infinite, but it's still dependent on it. And it can only use it as it was provided. And to take something out of context and be able to use it creatively, as we do in the halachic process, is something that AI, at least currently, cannot do. So far, I would agree that if we have a simple halachic question that, to be honest, we could have just as easily looked up or even Googled, no one really would say that AI cannot be used to paskin, to rule on that question and give a halachic answer. And also, it's important to explain that we are not asking, can AI become the community rabbi? We're not asking, can AI take on the communal role is the communal role. But if you say, okay, I'm not talking about the person who's giving the inspiring speech to the bar mitzvah boy, or Lo Aleinu, who's going to visit someone in the community sitting shiva, they are just now being called upon with a halachic question, which should be more of a black and white matter. Can AI, in that respect, answer that shaila? Very often, what is required to answer a shaila, especially if it's quite a sort of novel, complex question, we are taking previous questions, we're looking at the application of laws in different situations, and we're trying to apply that. So it definitely could be argued that AI would have the ability to do that better. It's got access to more information.
You have to accept what it says.
Okay,
How would it go with AI?
excellent question, excellent question. Although if we conclude, the question was, if you ask a question to a Rav and he gives you an answer, then you should accept it. And if you have asked AI for its halachic opinion, then what do you have to do? I mean, if we conclude today, or if we find enough reasons to say that in any situation that isn't the most simple of situations, we don't think AI can rule, then you just don't need to accept it at all, because you've been persuaded that AI cannot provide this halachic answer to you. I like that one. Okay, tell me what you mean.
The situation can be so different. And yet, you're always saying, to refer to
Yes,
this one.
yes. Although, and I don't want to get distracted by Gezerah Shava, but we say that Gezerah Shava was one of the 13 midot Shatoran and Dresha Bahen, and we don't make them up anymore. So they are sort of established rules, and we don't apply that principle to just make up anything else. Yeah.
Is this your question or is this a
No.
discussion?
Yeah. The question has been raised. It's not my question. Yeah. The question has been raised. Yeah, fairly widely already. Yeah. This question has been raised. Yes.
Question. If you found something that can be that's a critical issue, and it should be easy to turn on and off, either the programming or the function. But don't give me the answers you don't know.
The hallucinating we're talking about.
Yeah, because if you leave open the option that you can make up answers, that kills the whole.
I know. I mean, you describe it very persuasively. I agree with your logic. I don't know if the technology at the moment works like that. I don't know if it's as simple as that. The suggestion was hallucination, as we described, hallucination by AI should be able to just simply be turned off. But I don't think it's as simple as that at the moment. I'm sure they're working on it, especially following this case with the lawyer. Although, for example, in the law profession, it's clearly now being discussed, I'm sure, in all their CPD lectures, that you do not just use AI and blindly accept it. You do your own work.
Something built in that they put in, but can't figure out what to pick up something is something.
I understand your question. I understand your question. Hallucination presumably was something that was programmed in, because otherwise, how does that just happen? I don't know. I do not know the answer to that. I find it quite horrifying. I don't know how. I don't know why that would have been built in. Unless in trying to push the technology forward, there is this recognition that there is always going to be some gap in knowledge, etc. And you try and bridge it. And usually when you try and bridge it, I don't know, based on statistics, whatever, you're going to bridge it correctly. As I said, the style will be correct, right? The Talmudic citation will be very, very convincing. And then you look at it and it is not correct. But they're almost there, so to speak. The style's been reflected and the prose hasn't been interrupted. But some of the details are going to be incorrect. And then, as you said, well, that leaves us with, you could shrug your shoulders and say, well, the whole thing's useless to me if I can never be certain of the accuracy of any particular sentence.
Excuse me, may I say? I thought the beauty, oh, I'm sorry. What?
Right.
Hello?
Right. Hello.
I thought the beauty of halachic analysis, and I thought the beauty was the thinking process, was the human wanting to understand. It wasn't a court of, no, it was not a din, it was a heshek.
It absolutely is. And that's one of the main answers that we're getting to. I
Okay.
might not get to it today, I'm not sure, but absolutely the beauty of the halachic process being or having the focus on human involvement is definitely one of the main points that we'll be getting to.
I'm not sure that artificial intelligence is the correct tool to use for correcting graphic
Okay, explain a bit more. Explain a bit more.
But it just said that artificial intelligence is an incorrect answer. I mean, how do we know what's an incorrect answer? How do we know that?
No, we couldn't. We could only spot an incorrect citation. If they cited something as evidence or support of the argument or a reason for a particular conclusion, and they cited something, we could check the citation, and if it didn't exist, then we would know, well, I'm now going to take the conclusion with a grain of salt because the citation is incorrect. No, absolutely. Thank you everyone for your opinions, and we've basically touched on the main points that are, you know, the main reasons that are suggested for AI being unqualified to fulfill the role fully of a halachic authority. And the main point that I want to start with today, the first point, is that the halachic process has a great deal of subjectivity involved in it. And as we said, even if AI can very effectively and efficiently point you in the direction of particular references and rulings as well, and, you know, bottom line halachic rulings as well, how would it decide when to apply which conclusion? So many points in the halachic process have gone through halachic debates. Some of them, let's say, went through a halachic debate in the era of the Rishonim, and it was ruled upon in the Shulchan Aruch. So really the Shulchan Aruch is now a bottom line halacha. But some things are most definitely undergoing current debates as well, and arguments. And if you go to your local shul rabbi, they may or may not explain the debate, but they will also help you reach a bottom line final answer. Now, how is AI, let's say there is a very contemporary current debate going on, how is AI reaching that conclusion? Based on what? Based on what? Presumably, it's going to be statistical and no more than that. Like the majority of the information that's been fed in is veering in one direction. So that's the way that AI concludes. There doesn't seem to be any ability of AI to weigh up from a personal subjective perspective, this ruling would be most suitable, would be most pertinent in this case. We've discussed how a rabbi will stand there before the questioner and ask many follow-up questions. And the follow-up questions sometimes to the questioner may seem irrelevant. And the information that's obtained is so relevant in the authorities' eyes to give their answer. There's all these stories about many of the Acharonim who were given a halachic question and then a very similar or, you know, identical halachic question, and they came to different conclusions. You know, one woman walks in Erev Shabbat in a panic, something about the chicken, have I kashered it properly, etc., and the rabbi will rule it's not fine. And another woman walks in, seemingly exactly the same situation in question, and the rabbi will rule it's fine. And it may be that the circumstances as they presented themselves objectively seemed to be identical, but subjectively were really quite different. This woman clearly had nothing else to eat. So many of these stories reflect the fact that this is a living process. The halachic process is a living, dynamic process which allows room for human subjectivity. And it enables the halachic authority to reach conclusions based on valid reasons, logical reasons, ethical reasons, also the personal needs of the questioner. And it seems difficult to imagine that AI, as we say, at least currently, can ask relevant follow-up questions, ask seemingly irrelevant follow-up questions that are really, really important in gaining broader information on the situation, and then reach a well-argued conclusion. So we essentially are arguing that thinking analytically, which AI might be great at doing, is not the only thing that's needed to reach a halachic ruling, but they're really, really also entails a great deal of subjectivity. Rav Moshe Feinstein, I've brought a very, very short extract here, who wrote many, many tshuvot, is quoted here as being upset that his tshuvot were being translated. Some of his tshuvot were being translated without his permission. And he argued on a few accounts. First of all, he was concerned about the accuracy of the translation. Things always are lost or interpreted in translation. But he's also making a different point here, that when you provide a translation of my works, sometimes you are giving the bottom line. You're giving the simple answer, meaning it's also just being summarized. And if you summarize my halachic answer without giving all the svara, all the logic behind it, all the explanations and the backwards and forwards, then the entire answer loses its value, because without the analytics that goes behind it, you don't understand how the conclusion has been reached. So we'll read what he wrote inside source 1. So this is Rav Moshe Feinstein. He says, "V'gam laha'atik hatshuvot mamash pashut." You know, even if you just basically, very, very simply copy the answers, copy the bottom line answers. Shehu chesaron gadol liten hapsakim le'inshei da'alma. You know, there's a great disadvantage in just feeding these, you know, end results, these bottom line answers to the general populace. If you do not give my whole explanation and you're just feeding anyone, there may be some knowledgeable people out there reading it, there may be some less knowledgeable people out there reading my answers, and they have not had my entire explanation presented before them, then you're doing a great disservice, because they may take this answer and just try and extrapolate and reach different conclusions and apply what I've said in this case to another case. Whereas if you'd read my explanation, you would see that it was limited only to this case and this specific circumstance, and you couldn't apply the answer to another case because XYZ reasons that I listed. But if we are missing that out, then you're losing the main value of my answer. And it bothered him that that was being provided, as I said, to the general populace. It's a very interesting thing to discuss in general, but if we keep it pertinent to our artificial intelligence conversation, he essentially is saying, I have a reasoned argument. There will be subjective elements. We cannot just run our halachic process based on the bottom line. That's not the valuable part of the process. And what does AI do? It gives you the bottom line. It can also give some explanations, but there is no ability to see really how AI reached its conclusion. So I'm not saying it's always giving you a one-liner. It's not. It might give you a very full answer, but you do not have the ability to really understand the workings and the logic of the AI's answer. It's reached a halachic conclusion and you don't know why. And this is a general problem that people discuss in the world of artificial intelligence, the problem of explainability. Is it important for us to get accurate information? If so, AI might be great. It might be a great candidate. Is it important for us to have explainability? Transparency also, but it's a little bit different. Explainability. And it's a black box, okay? You do not have explainability with artificial intelligence. And that's in general, as I said, a concern to people in the world of artificial intelligence. And specifically here, for halakha, we are losing out if we do not have the personal touch, and we are losing out if we don't have this explainability. In addition, I'll throw out there, AI doesn't have the emotional intelligence that a halachic authority has. AI does not have the ability to see beyond dry information. Halakha is not a dry process. And therefore, the truth is, knowledge is not everything. And you see this in Shutim, in Shuvot, in halachic response the whole time, that you can hear in the words of the halachic authority the pain that they are feeling for the questioner or the person in need at the time. And this is not something, again, at least at the moment, that is in any way reflected in artificial intelligence. We discussed last week, we mentioned in our brief history of the halachic development, the 4 sections of the Shulchan Aruch. And there's this very sweet anecdote from the Khatam Sofer, I believe, possibly his son, the Khatam Sofer, apologies, who is mentioning, you know, really there are actually 5 sections. You know, we have these different sections where we're going to categorize our laws, but there's also this 5th idea, this idea of seichel, common sense. Common sense is the main thing I would translate it as, but, you know, feel the situation, apply some human emotional intelligence. There is knowledge, and then there is this seichel to put into play alongside it. And actually, seichel is exactly what artificial intelligence is missing. Just to drum the point home, sometimes when someone comes and asks a question, there's a great need to unpack the question and really work out what is behind their question, because sometimes you're asking follow-up questions to understand the question more deeply. Sometimes the question is not the question that they want the answer to at all. It really, really isn't. Is there psychology presenting the question like that? But the question is just their front. And sometimes a good halachic authority can intuit that and can realize they don't really only want the answer to that question. There's something behind this, and you ask a question and you get to a whole different, really a whole different world. And that is what they need help with. They need halachic assistance with, halachic clarity on a particular question. That isn't the question they phrased to you at all. And again, this ability to like break something down and to work out what's standing before it, I would argue, again, definitely at the moment is something that a human being is capable of doing with intuition, and that artificial intelligence cannot. You need to be able to really look the questioner in the eye and see perhaps what is not being said in the question. Another view of this, also something that's brought up in you asked, are people asking this question? Okay, people are asking this question, and this answer is being given in a lot of the answers. Artificial intelligence may be incapable of standing in place of or fulfilling the role of a halachic authority because it does not have divine assistance. It doesn't have what we call siyata deshmaya. Now, what exactly do I mean by this? If we jump firstly to source 2, it says in Dvarim, source 2, Al pi haTorah asher yorucha va'al hamishpat asher yomru lecha ta'aseh, according to the instructions which they teach you and the laws which they say to you, you should do. Lo tasur min hadavar asher yagidu lecha yamin u'smal. Do not deviate from what they tell you, right or left. Okay, so the idea in this pasuk is that if you receive halachic instructions or halachic rulings, you should follow them exactly. Do not deviate a little bit to the right, a little bit to the left. And Chazal learn into that. Do not deviate. If they tell you something is yamin and you think it's small, even then, do not deviate if they tell you the exact opposite of what you think, you know, the answer should be. And Kal vachomer, how much more so if you thought the answer should be yamin and they tell you yamin, or vice versa, how much more so should you follow their answer and accept their answer? Now, what does the Ramban say on this pasuk? It's very interesting. This is an extract from a longer Ramban. He says, "Ki al hadat shelahem hu noten lahem haTorah," because according to their knowledge, I'm going to translate that here, he gives them the Torah. Afilu yiyeh be'einecha kemachlit hayamin b'smal. Hashem has provided them with this answer that they've instructed you with. And even if you think it might be the total opposite of what you're expecting or of what your logic dictates, that is the answer that they have received from Hashem. וכל שכן שיש לך לחשוב שהם אומרים על ימין שהוא ימין, כי רוח השם על משרתי מקדשו ולא יעזוב את חסידיו לעולם. And then there are two verses that are quoted to show, to sort of bolster this idea that the Ramban is suggesting that the reason why we should follow halachic rulings and to the letter and not deviate from them at all is because they have had this spiritual assistance. They've had this Ruach Hashem, divine assistance, divine spirit sent to protect them and to help them. And he finishes, Nishmeru min hata'ot o min ha'mechshal. They are really protected and they are protected from making any mistake or from stumbling or from going astray. And this is interesting. The Ramban basically is explaining why the verse is instructing us to follow the rulings of halachic authority to the letter. And he's basically suggesting that we should do so because they receive some form of divine assistance. That it's not only based on years of learning, that it's not only based on hours of grappling with the halachic texts over the years, dealing with halachic texts that have come from all the eras of halachic development and understanding the process. It's not only that which allows them, which affords them the authority to reach this ruling, it is also that they have been granted some form of divine assistance. Was there a question? Yeah, do you have a...
So it was Onyx Rabbi, Brady Rabbi, he's probably going to play with someone in the world here too. Not, I don't know, majority.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's a very fair point. I would jump it back really, I'm about to repeat it. I would jump it back really to our original point, which we were discussing about the subjectivity and the personal aspect of halakha. When we go to a rabbi, and you mentioned this also really, you touched on it, we definitely take into account, especially if it's a big, complex question, we take into account who is this rabbi that I am choosing to go to, because they have a particular worldview, and the worldview will affect their answer. How does that play out in artificial intelligence? I think, as you've suggested, it seems quite clear at the moment it is just based on majority. The majority of the information that it's been fed will create the bias or influence the halachic answer. There basically is discussion as to whether you can limit that or you can control that, like filtering, I suppose. Okay, so can you say, can I have a halachic answer to this question based on Zionistic world view? You understand? So which probably can be done or could be done in the near future. Again, I really have no idea. I just did my research as thoroughly as I could, but it's still
Maura, to help you, may I say, please, that divine assistance sounds like a big deal, but we have a divine assistance when we pray after we go to the bathroom, for God's sakes. You know, we have divine assistance all the time, but when you're trained to use it, either when you paint or when you do halachic rulings, you just know how to lean into it. It's not to use the word, we should have a smaller word than divine assistance, because that sounds wow. But it's not that wow, because God's working with us when we just walk to the kitchen.
So what you're referring to is not what we're discussing at the moment. I would say there is a big difference between the belief that in our daily lives, as you said, just walking to the kitchen, there is divine presence. There is divine presence in our lives constantly. This is a different concept. I've just brought this one source which we looked at, but it's referred to on numerous occasions in the Talmud that such and such a mura, the person discussing the topic in the Talmud was given the answer through some form of divine assistance, or that they disagreed with each other and one of the halachic authorities brought his reason and the other one didn't, and he's just said, this is the answer that I believe is correct, and it came with divine assistance. Now, I'm not saying it's an easy concept to understand at all, and I'm not throwing it around lightly, but it's not the same as the idea of constant presence of Hashem in our lives. As I said, I've not brought all these different examples, but we see it again throughout the ages of the halachic process, brought up in different examples. How did he know the answer to that question? How was he trusted to give the accurate answer? Because he had siyata shema, because he had divine assistance at that moment in time.
Yudit?
Yeah.
Hi. Divine assistance, that sounds terribly arrogant. It didn't help Rabbi Eliezer, did it?
No. So this is something, it's a very, very good point to bring in. And it's going to be the focus of our next point of analysis of artificial intelligence. And I want you to bear it in mind the whole time, because it's a good point. We said it last week in the famous Talmudic passage that we don't listen to even a divine heavenly voice that's suddenly reverberating through the Bet Midrash. And do keep that in mind. And I don't want to misrepresent what's happening here. I wouldn't say we have, on every other daf of Gemara, I wouldn't say on every other page we have scenarios of relying on divine assistance. But there are these occasions, as I said, throughout the eras of the halachic process, where divine assistance was given as the reason, implying that there's an understanding that when you're involved in the grappling and engaging with the halachic process, you may, on occasion, perhaps not always, you may, on occasion, have this siyata deshmaya in reaching the conclusion. And it's valued. It's valued as something that is there for those who are engaged in the halachic process, and it's definitely not there for artificial intelligence. I have to be entirely honest with you. Some of you may be thinking, all right, artificial intelligence doesn't need divine assistance. I mean, it's like a technologically programmed being. It's got all the information at its fingertips. It doesn't need divine assistance. However, the point is made, the point is argued in several places that this actually is another key factor in reaching halachic rulings, and it's something that AI will not have. Okay, we literally just have 1-2 more minutes, so I won't go properly into the third answer. Rather, thank you, Leslie, I'll just reiterate what we said last week, what exactly the Talmudic passage was, because it's going to be part and parcel of our third way of analyzing this question. The case was that an oven was up for debate, a great fierce debate in the Bet Midrash as to whether the oven was tameh or tahar. And the majority of the rabbis ruled in one direction, and Rabbi Eliezer stood alone in his opinion on the other hand. But he says to them, he's insistent that he is correct, and he says to them a series of statements. If I am correct, the carob tree will prove my case, and the carob tree suddenly uproots itself miraculously. And they are totally uninterested in this phenomena. And they say to him, you don't bring halachic proofs from a carob tree. And he does the same thing with a stream of water, which suddenly flows upstream. And he does the same thing by calling on the walls of the Bet Midrash to demonstrate that he is correct. And the walls of the Bet Midrash suddenly start to cave in. And Rabbi Yeshua reprimands them and says, hey, if there's a debate happening in the Bet Midrash, what business is it of yours? So they straighten out slightly in respect of Rabbi Yeshua, but not entirely straighten themselves back to their original position in respect of Rabbi Eliezer. And finally, Rabbi Eliezer says, if I am correct, I will be divinely proven. And a bat call, a heavenly voice comes out and issues, Rabbi Eliezer is always correct. And at that, Rabbi Yeshua stands up and says, Lo b'shamayim. And that is the famous phrase from another pasuk in Dvarim, Lo b'shamayim hi, meaning, I did bring an extract of it in the source sheet. Lo b'shamayim hi, meaning, you've already told us, written in the Torah, which you've given us, that at the moment that you passed over this gift of the Torah to us, at that moment in time, you have put it into our hands willingly for us to now run with, for us to now carry and grapple with and engage with. And we have already written down principles to apply. For example, acharei rabim lahatot, follow after the majority. In a matter of disagreement, you don't just follow who your best friend is and what they say. You follow the majority opinion in the Bet Midrash. And therefore, we are going to follow the majority opinion in our Bet Midrash. And it is irrelevant to us what the heavenly voice has come out and issued, because Lo b'shamayim hi, the Torah is no longer in heaven. Now that I used last week in the introductory shir, really as maybe one of the most dramatic Talmudic passages to show us the beauty of the human engagement in the halachic process, and how it is supposed to be that way, But if it's supposed to be that way, we have to remember straight away, humans are involved, there's human error. Humans are fallible. And therefore, that was the focus of this Talmudic passage last week. Within this context, we're going to take it in roughly the same, but slightly different direction to help us understand the next point of analysis on artificial intelligence. But until that point, we might be safer off checking out answers ourselves or asking the local shul rabbi. And have a fabulous week, everyone. And thank you for all of those who joined on Zoom as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Yudit.